Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to part 2 of reading the best horror books of 2024. This one is Bookstagram edition. So if you guys saw the video before this, I read from Booktube recommendations for the best horror of 2024. I have 3 books in that video, and I will be having 3 books in today's video. There is really no rhyme or reason to any of the counts that these recommendations are from. I was literally just scrolling through Bookstagram and just keeping a tally of every single book that popped up, and once again there were 3 that stood out above the rest. So coming in once again with 6 recommendations is American Rapture by CJ Lead. This was mentioned by Library of a Librarian, Book of Moths, Biblio Phantasmama, I think, Matt's Books and Drams, Read Rad Read, or Red Rad Red, however you want to pronounce that, and Books in the Freezer. Once again, if I mispronounce anybody's Bookstagram name, I do apologize. Please bear with me. So this is the first book on our TBR, which I am excited for because this is on my TBR. I did not enjoy Mayfly by this author, but I'm really excited to see what this one brings. The next one is one that I am shocked by because I feel like I've only seen negative reviews for this book, at least in the book community or the book space that I'm in, or the people that I tend to follow have not been loving this book, and I wasn't going to read it for that reason, so I'm a little bit apprehensive going into it. But this book was mentioned 5 times, and that is Diavola, I think is how you're supposed to say it, by Jennifer Thorne. So this one was mentioned by Reposeful Reads, Afton's Library, Spoopy Reader Mama, Abandoned Quests, and Library of a Librarian again. So hopefully I love it. Maybe this will be one of those cases where I get in my head about a book and I think that I'm not going to enjoy it, and then I pick it up and I really like it. So like I said, I was keeping a tally of every book that I saw mentioned more than once, but there was none that stood out like those 2. However, there was one book that actually did come up a couple of times in my Booktube research. So this book had 3 mentions on Booktube and then also 3 mentions on Bookstagram. So I figured, why not add it to the TBR? I've seen it come up a whole bunch, and that is All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville, which I am also really surprised by because I feel like Adam Neville, in the horror space, he's pretty popular, but like overall, I don't think he's like super popular, at least in my head. I don't know. I also had no clue that this book was published in 2024. I know I had seen it around, but I didn't know it was a new release, so I feel like it makes more sense now. So the people that mentioned this book on Bookstagram were Eve Loves Books, Travel, Art, The Wandering Reader, and Constant Reader 89. And then on Booktube, it was mentioned by Happy Goat Horror, Criminale, and Mike's Book Reviews. So I feel like enough people are loving this that I'm excited to really pick it up. So without further ado, those are the 3 books that I will be reading in today's video. Let's go ahead and get reading. Make sure to watch part 1 if you haven't watched that one yet. So I started American Rapture today by CJ Lead, and I low-key forgot that I was reading this for a vlog, and I just got so into the story that I forgot to do an update, but I am now 127 pages into the book, which I feel like is a pretty good amount. CJ Lead, if you guys don't know, is the author of Mayfly, which is a book that I actually didn't enjoy. I gave it 2 stars. I think that was 2023, and it ended up being in my worst books of the year. So I was still interested in this, like even before this vlog, I added it to my TBR because it sounded interesting to me and I wanted to give her another chance to see if I could enjoy some of her stuff. So in American Rapture, we are following this girl. She is 16, almost 17 years old, and her name is Sophie. I was like, it's either Sophie or Sophia. And her parents are very religious and like very strict with their religion. She lives a very sheltered life. She does not have access to the TV. She doesn't have access to the computer. She doesn't have a cell phone. Or she's not even really allowed to look at her father's newspaper. She goes to a Catholic school where everything is very monitored there. She is only allowed to read certain books from the library, but she does sneak in some other books, and it's just like a very sheltered and like she's just constantly being watched by these people. She has a twin brother as well, but he was caught with something that his parents didn't want him to have, and so they sent him away to a like religious reform school, and she has not seen him since then, but she tries to talk to him on the phone and she really misses him. They very obviously have a very close relationship, and it's very interesting because of the way that they're brought up. They kind of are both on the opposite end of the spectrum, where he does not believe in anything at all. He is not religious. He sees the flaws within the system and doesn't believe any of it, and was always kind of trying to push back, where she is the other way, where this is all she's known her whole life. She believes her parents, she believes these people that are authority figures in her life, and she just doesn't know any better. She thinks, she thinks anything else, if she goes against what she is taught, that she's gonna get possessed by a demon and she's gonna go to hell. So we just get a really good look at the way her upbringing has affected her and the way that these religious teachings have affected her and being away from her brother. But we are basically following her when there is this like really big flu outbreak, but it's not just the normal flu. The disease, the virus, I guess technically is what it is, mutilates and has changed, and now has become this thing where the infected people, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this that is like appropriate for YouTube, but the infected people have sex with other people non-consensually, and that's like what the whole virus is. So it's kind of like, I see a lot of people say this is like the zombie apocalypse, and it is kind of like zombie-ish, but the main thing that is affecting these people is it's a very big sexual assault aspect to it. So if that's not something you're comfortable reading about, definitely don't pick this book up, because like that's the entire plot. Like, we're reading about these horrible assaults that are taking place. Honestly, it took a little while for the story to pick up. We were really getting a lot of background and getting a good look into Sophie's life and what it's like being with her parents, going to the school that she goes to, how the other kids treat her, because, even though they all go to the same Catholic school and everything, they deal with the same things at the school, they don't live as sheltered lives as she does. Like, it takes place in the modern world. Like, there's references to TikTok and their cell phones and things like that, but Sophie, reading from her perspective, it doesn't feel like that because she's never been exposed to any of that. So even just trying to get information on this flu, on the virus, has been really, really difficult. Like, she didn't really find out how bad it was until like there's mandatory quarantines in place, because her parents would not tell her anything, the school would not tell her anything, and that goes into the religious aspect as well, with these people thinking that they are protected by Jesus, they are protected by the blood of Christ, and this thing will not affect them because they are such strong believers. And clearly it's something that's here to punish the sinners. It's the demons like getting into these people, and so they think that they cannot be touched by this thing. But Sophie's parents do eventually get infected, and she takes off in the car. She's by herself, like I said, just barely 17 years old, and she is trying to get to her brother, who is away at this other facility, and they're, I think it's like 250 miles away, and she's just trying to get to him, and it's pretty much the end of the world. So that's pretty much as far as I've gotten into the book so far. She is with a group of police officers right now because a lot of shit went down while she was driving on the highway. There's a mandatory quarantine for all of these counties, and she's not allowed to leave the county. And being a minor, the cops couldn't just like leave her there and say, go home. So she is with them because she doesn't really have anywhere else to go. And that's as far as I am in the story right now. I will say I'm enjoying this a lot more than Mayfly. That was the one thing that before going into this I was like, I just hope it's better than Mayfly, and in my opinion it is. I'm really enjoying the writing. I'm really enjoying the way that CJ Lead has set the scene for this book and set the tone for the book and really set up the characters and their backstories before we are getting into anything too crazy. But I know things are starting to pick up, and I think it's going to get a lot crazier from here. But I'm really enjoying a lot of the commentary and the way that it's looking at religion, and it's focusing a lot obviously on religious trauma and the effects that that has on people. So once again, if that's something that's triggering to you, this is a book that you should use caution before going into. Right now, I feel like I'm getting to this point where my enjoyment is kind of dipping down just a little bit because I want something different to happen. We spent so much time setting up, and then we get the general premise of what this virus is, and I'm like, okay, yes, we've read about multiple assaults and sexual violence that have occurred, so like, can we move on to something else and get to some more substance within the story, which I definitely think that there will be, because she has, like I said, such a strong relationship with her twin brother, and the whole story is her trying to get to him. So I'm really excited to see the family aspect of it come into play. So that's pretty much where I am in the book so far. I am really enjoying it, but I want something different to happen. I want some variation in the story, and I think we're getting to that point. It's just really interesting. Obviously, you know, there are a lot of, I feel like, what is the word? A lot of reflections of COVID and the whole pandemic with that, and the way that things were handled in the beginning and how crazy everything was. And it's just, I feel like for me, reading about pandemics or things like that within books is always so interesting. Not only having gone through COVID as the rest of us have, but also working in healthcare, and I worked in healthcare throughout the entire pandemic, and I saw firsthand how it came into our facility and affected the people there. We were really lucky where I worked, which I'm thankful for. We didn't have any deaths due to COVID. It was a while before we got our first case, and we did a pretty good job of keeping it out for how big our facility was. But I just think it's interesting anytime I read like a pandemic type of story, apocalyptic type of story that has something to do with a virus, it just like freaks me out a little bit, because I'm like, oh my god, like knowing the type of work that I do, like what would I do in this world, like if this started happening and like coming into the facility that I work at, like it just would be so scary and very unsettling, and it really gets under your skin, and I don't like it, but I like it. So I'm very excited to keep reading this one. I will update you guys when I get a little bit further in, and hopefully my enjoyment stays up here rather than going down the further we get into the story. So American Rapture, I've just gotten to page 283, so I have less than 100 pages left in the book. I'm still really enjoying it so far. Like, there are parts where I'm like super into the story. The stakes are high. It gets very suspenseful. Obviously there's a lot of like bloody killing and a lot of really brutal parts. It's very bleak and very hopeless throughout, just the world that we're in and the situation that the characters are in. One thing though that I'm not really enjoying about this book is our main character is 16, like I told you guys, almost 17, but I know she grew up very sheltered because of religion, and she was always taught that sex was wrong and that attraction was wrong. But now that she's getting away from that and seeing that things that she was taught as she was growing up aren't necessarily true, and experiencing so much new things for the first time, I feel like it's really weird, because now she's like, every single person she interacts with, sorry, my boyfriend's typing. Every single person that she interacts with, she is just like immediately infatuated with and attracted to for some reason. Like the cop that she's with, he is 24, and she's like, oh my god, he's the hottest guy I've ever seen. Then we have this other guy whose name is Ben, who is around the same age as her, and she has run into him a couple times like before all this happened at school, and she feels the same way. She's like, oh my god, this is the hottest guy I've ever seen. And then she's also like attracted to some women that she's coming across, which obviously that's fine, but it's like, why is every single person that she's interacting with somebody that she has to be attracted to? And then because she's attracted to one of the guys, and then if he goes and talks to another girl, she's getting all jealous and constantly comparing herself to these other women. And like I said, I do understand to a certain extent because of the way that she grew up. Like, this is all going to be very new to her, and there's going to be a lot of feelings that come with that. But also, looking at the situation, you're literally in an apocalyptic situation where you're watching people get assaulted and murdered in very violent ways multiple times, like pretty much every day. I feel like the last thing on your mind would be to compare yourself to somebody else and be like, oh, I'm just not as pretty as that other girl, and like, this guy doesn't like me because he's talking to her. Like, clearly there are more important things. So that's the main thing for me right now that I'm not a super big fan of. Also, I feel like there is starting to be a little bit of repetition within the story where, like, I said this in my last update, like, I want something else to happen. I want to get into different territory than what we've gone through so far, just following her as she's trying to survive in this world and get to her brother. I'm still really interested in that aspect of it. Obviously, their relationship is very strong, and there are a lot of things about her brother that she has just recently learned and she is coming to terms with, and I think that will be really interesting to see how that all plays out. So I have mixed feelings. The parts that I'm enjoying are parts that, like, I'm really enjoying. I'm very invested and very captivated. I'm like, oh my god, this could be 5 stars. And then there's like something else will happen that I'm not a really big fan of, and it kind of takes me out of the story a little bit. I'm gonna finish American Rapture. I will come back to you guys in a little bit with my final update and my final rating, and we'll see what happens. A little bit later, I am done with American Rapture. I think for a final rating, I'm gonna land on 4 stars. I wanted this to be a 5 star so bad, but unfortunately I just have to be okay with the fact that it was not. There were some parts, like I said, that I didn't like. There were some parts where it almost started to drag. Like, this book felt longer than it is. It was like 360 something pages, but I feel like it went on for so long, although there were a lot of points that I was really enjoying. I think the imagery and the atmosphere was done very well. I think the suspense and the intrigue and the buildup of the tension and danger and how things are just constantly escalating was done really well. I think the highlight on the relationship between our main character and her brother was done very well as well, and I enjoyed all of the side characters. There were some moments that did shock and surprise me. There is one little thing that I want to say. This is like a trigger warning, but it's also sort of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know anything, just go ahead and skip ahead. But if you would like to get a small little trigger warning that might spoil some things, there is a dog in this book, and the dog does die. I'm very sad to let you know that, but I feel like violence against animals or animal deaths are always one thing that I really try to warn people about, because I feel like a lot of times that gets overlooked. I think, you know, most people point out the very common triggers of like sexual abuse and domestic abuse and things like that, but I don't know why, I just feel like sometimes animal abuse and animal deaths are not always properly talked about when people give out trigger warnings. So just be aware of that before going into this. It also is a scene that goes on for a while, so you are reading about this particular incident over the course of a couple of pages, so do with that knowledge what you will. Overall, there were a lot of things that I did really enjoy. I don't really have a lot to say about it. I really liked the religious aspect of it and the way that that influenced the story and different things that were happening in the world, and also how realistic it felt at some points with people's reactions to things. I definitely see why this ended up on so many favorites lists and why so many people are loving it. For me, like I said, it worked a lot better than Mayfly, so I definitely will pick up another release from CJ Lead, and now I get to find out if that release will be something that I enjoy or something that I don't enjoy. It's like a 3rd time's the charm type of thing. So that's it for book number 1 of this video. Let's go ahead and see what I'm reading next. I feel like the lighting is doing something very weird here. I have lights plugged in that you can't really see. Maybe if I turn this, you can see what I'm talking about. And it's making things look weird on my face, so hopefully that's not distracting. But I am 35% of the way through the next book, which is All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville. For me right now, this book is just like very average. Like, I'm not disliking it, but I'm not really loving it either. Like, it's not bad, but it's also not great. I feel like it's just very average. And I'm wondering myself if I am like missing something, because scrolling through Goodreads, this book has so many 4 and 5 star reviews, which is great. I'm so happy that so many people are loving this book, but like what am I missing? That to me, it just feels so like meh, like very middle of the line. This is like an apocalyptic alien horror book. You guys have heard me talk about Adam Neville before. I do enjoy his books, and maybe it's because I read Last Days by him earlier this month that I really like that one, and so this one I feel like it just doesn't seem as great as that one to me, or if it's just like the story in this one, it's just all very average. I know apocalyptic stories are, I feel like you have to do something really special with those because a lot of the time they follow the same sort of storyline where we have a group of survivors after the apocalypse. They're traversing through the world and they're trying to figure out what's happening and how to start a new life, and that's no different in here. I think the premise of like the aliens and stuff is really interesting, but other than that it's not doing anything really crazy. So in the book we have our main character whose name is Carl, who is this middle-aged man, and we come into the book with this, it's not really a dream sequence because we come to learn that it really did happen, but it kind of feels like a fever dream because he's sick when all of this happens. But it's like the dead of night and all of a sudden there's these bells that chime outside, and then the entire sky is like turned red and everybody just like leaves their house and goes outside and then like ascends and like gets lifted off of the earth essentially. And Carl, being bedridden because he has the flu, does not make it outside. So he wakes up the next day. Like I said, he thinks this is just a fever dream because he's like, obviously that didn't happen. He was seeing people of his life that were dead and they were like, Carl, come with us. And obviously you would think that's a dream. So he just gets up and thinks it's a normal day, but then he starts to notice really, really strange things. For example, it's wintertime, so it's freezing cold, but all of the houses on the street in this neighborhood, they have their doors open, and he starts to investigate a little bit, and it seems like people have just kind of left in the middle of random things. There is one house where the stove is on, and he's seemingly like the only survivor until he stumbles upon some other people. So firstly, he stumbles upon his neighbor, his elderly neighbor who has dementia. She obviously cannot move around a lot by herself, so it makes sense why she did not ascend like everybody else. And then as we are following him through the story, he encounters two children who he learns also had the flu and were sick when this happened, and now he feels this sort of responsibility for these young children, and so he has kind of taken them under his wing, and they have paired up with another guy who is very clearly like going to be the antagonist or like the villain of the story, because he seems like, okay, he kind of knows what he's doing. He's very much in survival mode and he's very prepared for that, but he's also very, very strange with the way that he goes about things and a little bit unhinged and a little bit scary at times, and I think that's definitely going to take a turn later on in the story. So at this point we are just following this group of 4 people. They have learned that the events that Carl thought were a dream did actually happen. All of these people remember hearing the bells chime and remember seeing their loved ones walk outside and just like float off of the earth, and now they are coming to learn that the sky is very, very slowly turning red. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a red sunset that is just like slowly encroaching, and they learn that when they are in these areas where the light is red, there are these weird beings that come out, and I mean they're pretty much aliens, and they seem to be blind, they seem like maybe they're deaf, but they know that these people are there for some reason, and it's like they're kind of doing a cleanup of the people that got left on Earth after the initial event. So it's just weird. So they're trying to stay alive, and they are trying to go further south to where the sky is not red anymore, because that's like, they know in like normal daylight these things cannot, I don't know if like can't exist is the right word, but like they just can't function, I guess, without this red light. Honestly, right now I don't have a lot to say about it. I don't really feel particularly connected to any of the characters. I don't feel super connected to the story itself. It is very interesting, and I am wondering if we're going to actually learn more. I think we're gonna just be kind of in the dark like the rest of these characters, but there's definitely a lot of religious undertones in here. Obviously with the title being All the Fiends of Hell, like that kind of gives you an idea of like heaven and hell, and then also just the apocalypse as it happened. Like it kind of gives you like Rapture vibes with all these people ascending, and then there's also like a woman in here that he stumbles across that is like quoting the scripture that references like bells and things like that, which I don't really know anything about that. I've never read the Bible, so I don't know if that's a real thing, but there's definitely very religious undertones. So it's kind of this question of like, was this an act of God? Like, are these creatures gods? Are these creatures angels? Is it religious in itself, or is it just like these alien beings? Are these demons from hell? Like, why did so many people ascend but then these other ones were left on Earth? And what is the purpose of this ascension? Like, what happened to the people that disappeared from the Earth? And what, like, it's just, there's so many questions, which I think is really interesting. It's definitely a very interesting setup, but the writing itself and like the story and the characters isn't really doing a lot for me personally. It's definitely very reminiscent of some other kind of apocalyptic things. It's reminding me a little bit of like The Mist, in that they have to like outrun the red sky, and then it's also obviously very reminiscent of like War of the Worlds and the idea of like these aliens that come down and are killing all these people and purging the earth of all these humans. It's interesting, but I'm just not like super, I don't know, I'm not super invested into the story, and I don't know. I feel like I was going to say something else, but I don't know with this one. That's where I'm going to leave it for now. I'm going to continue reading this. Let me just say the first 4 chapters were pretty reasonable length, and then I got to chapter 5, and tell me why I'm reading on my Kindle and it says 2.5 hours left in the chapter. Excuse me, what? So I'm currently in the middle of this chapter that's like 150 pages, and I just had to pause for a minute because that's a lot for me right now. Okay, 75% of the way through the book now, and I still feel very much the same. Like, it still feels very average to me. I will say Carl, our main character, has grown on me a little bit, and I do enjoy the dynamics of it, like him unexpectedly becoming the responsible party for these 2 young children, and it is really interesting because it's just kind of like him pondering how if he was by himself in this world, he would have killed himself. He would have been like, no, I'm good, I'm out. But he kind of feels like an obligation to these kids to take care of them. So I do think it's really, really interesting, like in that aspect and just the dynamics of it. And there's a lot of tension with that, obviously. These kids, you know, they don't really know this man. Like, that's not the ideal situation for them. They're obviously grieving their parents, and they want their normal life back, and they are children. Like, they're trying to be normal kids, but this is in anything but normal situation. And this man, obviously, like, it's not ideal for him either because he doesn't know these kids. He's never had kids of his own, so he doesn't really know how to be a strong guardian and a good role model for them. So I do think like the whole dynamic of everything is really interesting, but other than that, it's like not really doing a whole lot. There have been some developments in the story, and Carl and one of the children is now separated from the other child, and they are driving obviously to try to find this child and reunite and get her back. But I feel like along the way that they were driving, they kept stopping for the most pointless things. Like, I understand stopping if you need food, if you need water, if you need a shelter for the night to rest. But I swear they were stopping for the most like random things. They were like, let's just stop and walk around. I'm like, don't you like have like isn't there a goal here? Aren't you supposed to be kind of driving to find this person and not just wasting time? And then every time that would happen, Carl would be like, oh my god, we're wasting so much time, and then he would keep doing it, which like I don't understand. Maybe that's just me, maybe that's like a little nitpicky thing, but like, come on, like, what do you mean? I do want to share a couple of quotes that I highlighted that I thought were really interesting, and I really liked the way that they were written. Like, there's a lot of existential dread within the story, which obviously makes sense with the situation that's going on. And so I feel like after about the 50% mark, my interest was piqued a little bit more, and I was more into the thought processes and the inner mind the consciousness of these people and like what they're thinking throughout this situation, but like the actual action and the story of it isn't really holding my attention. Okay, actually, before I get into the quotes that I liked, there's this one quote that I highlighted because I literally read it and I was like, what does that mean? And I read it to my boyfriend and he was like, what does that mean? It says, a brown haze of evil smelling smoke drifted from behind the wing. Can somebody explain to me what evil smells like? What is evil smelling smoke? So this is one passage that I really like. It says, survivors were mere witnesses, a scattering of stragglers. No one would ever hear their brief stories. There were no more stories. A few desperate actions remained to be unrecorded and unremarked upon. Narrative had ended. Everything mankind had done and built and known was redundant, discarded. The world was a landfill. He found that the hardest thing to accept, that nothing would be commented upon again nor processed. It just was. And then something else would continue in the place of his species, which gave me that really like existential vibe. And I just really liked that quote. And then on the next page he says, why was he looking for the boy's sister and endeavoring to discover if the sea could prolong their existence? Each endeavor would probably kill them as swiftly as complete inactivity, but he dared think no further than those two tasks. Their own end was a finality that he strived not to visualize, the final frantic moments of consciousness, the darkness that followed. For now, he would just drive. They were hungry. And I think that really sets the tone very well of like what it would be like to be in this apocalyptic landscape and to be like so focused on survival, but then in the back of your head, you're like, what is even the point of like any of this? So yes, it's true, there are a lot of things that I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying like the general premise of it, but I feel like just the story itself isn't as strong as it could be. Another thing with Adam Neville is like his writing is very, very descriptive. Like he will explain the setting and visuals of a certain scene for paragraphs and pages, and it's really great at times, but sometimes I feel like it's a little bit too much. I feel like every Adam Neville book I've read, though I've enjoyed them, I always feel like they go on for a little bit longer than is necessary, and I do feel the same way about this one. Like, this is 400 pages, and I don't think it needs to be 400 pages. Like, it's sort of dragging a little bit for me. It's not really holding my full attention when I'm reading it, and I'm really, really sad about that. It's also, like, very descriptive, like I said, but with the setting that we're in, it's like, this is like Adam Neville plays the game of how many different ways he can say that the sky is red in 400 pages. And I've kind of been highlighting some of those passages as well because it's interesting. He's like, crimson and blood colored, and I'm like, okay, give me some more synonyms for the word red, tell me more. But like, how many times in a 400 page book can you tell me that the sky is red? I feel like that sounds like I'm hating it, and I'm not. I just like, I'm getting a little bored. So my plan is to finish this tonight. Kindle says I have like an hour and a half left in the book, so I should be able to finish it, and then I will give you guys my final thoughts. Honestly, at this point, I have no clue what this rating might be. It could be a 3, it could be a 4, definitely not going to be a 5, but probably somewhere in that range, but I don't really know. It really depends what happens in the last bit of this book, because truly I have no clue where the story is going to go, or how these people are going to get out of this situation. It just seems very hopeless, but I mean, that is the theme with apocalyptic horror, is that everything seems hopeless all the time. So I think I'm going to land on 3 stars for all the Fiends of Hell. I hate getting on camera and saying this, but like, honestly, I don't have much more to say that I haven't already said in my updates. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot. I will say, like, the characters definitely grew on me by the end. I like the way that it ended, and I like the way that the story wrapped up. But as a whole, as like an apocalyptic alien invasion type of horror, the whole thing just felt very average to me. Not bad, not great. I feel like the whole time I just didn't feel fully pulled into the story and fully invested in the story. Like, I was following along with the characters and witnessing everything that they went through, and there were, you know, some horrific scenes, as there typically is within an apocalyptic novel, but I feel like it definitely had its flaws, and it definitely had things that I wasn't enjoying. At the end of the day, I just wasn't fully invested the whole time, and like I said, there were points where it was dragging and I was like, can we wrap it up? Because why is this still happening? So I feel like landing on 3 stars for this one is very fair because I didn't absolutely hate it. I would recommend this. Obviously fans of Adam Neville, I would recommend this. Pick this up. If you want a unique alien invasion story that does not hold back on like the graphic deaths and brutal violence and blood and all of that, definitely pick it up. If you want characters that you can root for, if you want this interesting found family sort of dynamic, then I would recommend it. It was alright. I am happy that I read it because I eventually want to work through most of Adam Neville's stuff. He's got a lot of things out there, but I do want to continue reading from him, so this is just another book that I got to check off the list. As usual, ignore the screaming children. Diavola, however you pronounce this. I am now 67% of the way through, which in the physical book is page 196. I've been listening to this mostly on audio. I did do a little bit of physical reading today, but I'm really enjoying the audio version of it. I think the narrator is doing a really, really good job with it. I believe this is the same narrator. Okay, unless I'm getting my books mixed up, this is narrated by Andy Arndt, who also narrated Beautyland, which I listened to earlier this month, and I just thought it was interesting that I just coincidentally picked up 2 books that were narrated by the same person. That's not important. Anyways, point is, I like the audio version of this, so I plan to finish it on audio, and since that tends to go by pretty quickly, I wanted to do my update before I get to that point, because that's the thing with audiobooks is like, if I start them, I just like listen to them so easily while I'm doing things, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm almost finished with this book and I haven't said a single thing about it. So this takes place in Italy. We are following a family, a very dysfunctional family with a lot of issues, and they are going to Italy for a vacation, obviously, as you do, and they have rented this Villa Tacola. See, I listen to things on the audiobook and then I don't remember how to pronounce them. But anyways, this big villa in Italy is where they're staying, and pretty much as soon as they get there, things are very strange. Our main character that we're following, her name is Anna, and pretty much as soon as she arrives at the villa, she is like seeing stuff. She sees somebody in the tower of the villa, and then later finds out that there's actually not even a window in that room. It's like boarded up, and then the tower is also locked anyway, so nobody has access up there. They do get the key, but they are advised against going in there or unlocking the door, which, why would you give these people the key and then be like, but don't use it? Because then, like, of course they're gonna be like, well, I'm gonna use it because I want to know what's in there. So we are essentially just following this family and all of their issues and all of their drama and all of their tension on this little Italian vacation. And there's also a ghost in the villa that they're staying in, which they come to learn is like notoriously haunted in the area. And it's really, really interesting. Like, one thing, I guess, like I told you guys, I have really only seen negative reviews, at least in like the online spaces that I'm in, where I've seen just naturally people talking about this. But I'm really enjoying it way more than I thought it would, because, you know, seeing all these negative reviews, I wasn't going to pick it up, and I just didn't think that I was going to enjoy it. So I was reading more about why people don't like it, and I guess it seems like the big critique or the big issue people have with this is that it is such a slow burn, and it's not like very in-your-face horror, and it's kind of more like subtle. I feel like a lot of times like paranormal or like ghostly horrors are more subtle and more slow burn, and that's definitely the case with this one. But I'm just really enjoying like the story of it as well as the atmosphere. Like, you can picture everything that's happening so well, and the like setting being Italy, I feel like is done so well. Like, I feel like, I don't know, it's just like very, very vivid. So on that front alone, I am enjoying it. It is definitely a slow burn horror, but that's okay. The little tidbits of like hauntings and the little like ghost sightings that we get are, I think, really well done. They're interesting. Like, they're pretty creepy at points. Obviously, it starts off very slow and it's starting to build up to this point, But I'm really excited to finish this. This is why I wanted to do my update now. Obviously because I wanted to do an update before I finish the book. But I've also, from looking at some more reviews today, people say that the last section, like the last 25% of this book, it takes a totally different direction and gets crazy and gets a little bit unhinged. I do have one theory. I shouldn't really call it a theory. I have like one loose idea of like something that I think might happen at the end, but I have really nothing to back up that theory. So I'm very curious to see where it goes. I think the writing's great. I think the setting is great. The characters, obviously, like, this is, like I said, this family has a lot of issues and there's a lot of bickering and there's a lot of drama, but I think it's really well done and I feel like almost very true to life and maybe relatable for a lot of different people, like when you have these big family gatherings, and you know, no family is perfect and a lot of shit is gonna go down, and Anna is kind of like the black sheep of the family and she is kind of always, I don't know, getting on the bad side of these people unintentionally. Like, she's just like doing her thing, but they have a lot of opinions about that. It's kind of reminding me, and I don't even know why, but it's reminding me of Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey, which is like another haunted house story that initially I wasn't super interested in, and then I started reading it and I was really enjoying it, and that one definitely takes a turn towards the end and it goes in a direction that I really liked. And so now I'm like curious, I'm like, what is this one gonna do? Like, what is the turn it's going to take? I'm so excited to finish this. Diavola. That's how the audiobook narrator pronounces it, so that's what I'm going to assume is correct. I just finished it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to rate it. I was going between 3.5 stars and 4 stars, and I think I'm leaning more towards 3.5 stars. I don't know if I'm missing something or maybe I just misinterpreted what people were saying, but I was expecting like the end of this book to do something crazy. Like, I was expecting it to have some sort of twist, to kind of have this crazy reveal, or just do anything crazy, and it really didn't. I feel like it had, I don't want to say a typical ending because every story is different, but it didn't do anything unexpected. Though I enjoyed it, it just wasn't anything crazy or like anything super out there like I was expecting or like I was led to believe what happened. So I think maybe that's my own fault. Maybe I just misinterpreted something. I did enjoy the story though. Don't get me wrong. I like the way that it wrapped up, but I guess one of the big things for me is like, I feel like, yes, it was very slow burn, but even when we got to the point where a lot of things were happening, there wasn't really any point where I felt scared or I felt like there was a lot of suspense or like I felt like the character was in danger. Like, nothing that the haunting or the ghost was doing felt life-threatening. Like, life-changing, yes. Life-threatening, no, not really. And our main character, she had a very, like, what is the word? She was just very indifferent, I guess, about everything. Not indifferent, like, she was definitely being affected by these things, but she kind of had, like, a hard shell and this, like, I don't give a fuck attitude, and was like talking back to the ghost, which I did find funny, but I feel like definitely added to that feeling of like, I don't feel really scared or like there's anything dangerous or threatening happening to this main character. So I didn't feel a lot of like suspense or like on the edge of my seat. There were a few things that were described with the ghost that I was like, okay, that's kind of creepy, but I never felt scared. And I know being scared is not the only thing that horror is about or the only thing that makes horror good, but it is what I was expecting from this one, or expecting some sort of weirdness. As I've mentioned before though, the setting is what really makes this, like the descriptiveness of Tuscany, of where they are, of the villa, and everything that they're doing throughout their vacation, I think was on point. It was perfect. I felt like I was there with them, experiencing Italy and going to the restaurants and going to the art museums and the villa and the nature side of it all I feel like was definitely there. Like the setting and the descriptiveness and the atmosphere I really appreciated. Just as a haunted house or as like a ghost story, it didn't do anything really crazy for me. I like the way it wrapped up. I would still recommend this. I would definitely recommend it if you want a slow burn, kind of gothic, atmospheric, very descriptive horror. Also, if you enjoy things like local legends or lore, or like kind of this haunting or a haunted place that is infamous, like all of the people, all of the locals kind of know about it and have different opinions and play different parts in this thing, and if you like the feel of that, then I would definitely recommend this book. If you enjoy very strained family dynamics, also a little bit of a light mystery, I think this could work really well for you. And I did enjoy the writing. I would definitely read something else from this author, but this one was just like, okay, going in expecting to hate it, coming out with 3.5 stars is not bad at all. 3.5 stars is not a bad rating, but I wanted to like it a little bit more, but I did enjoy it. And I guess that brings us to the end of the video, which once again, if you didn't watch part 1 where I read from like Booktubes' favorite, or the ones that popped up the most, definitely go check that out. I will link that down below. But thank you to all of the Bookstagrammers that posted their favorites and allowed me to create this video. That's pretty much all I have to say. So with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.